Hey everybody, and welcome to this tutorial where I'm going to be showing you how to scrape transfermarket.com. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you 3 different methods of web scraping that are going to allow you to scrape transfermarket.com. It is definitely a more complex site to scrape just because of the way the site is set up. It's not a very conventional site. A lot of it is also in German. A lot of the code is written in German, so I don't speak German. It's a little difficult to understand. But the good thing is that it is still easily scrapable. We can easily extract the information that we need. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we're on transfermarket.com. And then we're also going to go and do a little bit of setup work. So head over to a terminal or a command prompt on your computer. We're just going to install the packages that we need. So we'll say pip install bs4 and then space requests. So this is installing 2 packages. The first one is Beautiful Soup, which is going to allow us to parse the page. Request is going to allow us to make HTTP requests and extract the data from the actual page. So go ahead and run that. And I have already run that, so mine just says it's already satisfied. But if you didn't have all of that satisfied, then it would say like it's installing a bunch of stuff, right? Next thing we need to do is we just need to open up Jupyter Notebook. So just type in Jupyter Notebook right here, and it will open up a Jupyter Notebook. And once you have that open, just come up here, hit New, Python 3, and we are ready to go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so it's a little bit easier to see my actual code. So let's head back over to Transfer Market, and what we'll do is we are going to scrape Erling Haaland's data in this. So we're going to be extracting player data, okay? So just come in here, just type in Erling Haaland, let's hit search, and we'll come to his player page. And so what this page has is it has a lot of different information about the player, such as their birth date, where they were born, their agent, has different statistics. It has market values, which a lot of people find important and interesting. And it also has contract information, has who their outfitter is or who they're sponsored by, has different social media links, right? So there's a lot of really good player information on this page. It has injury history as well, transfer history. So anyways, go ahead and close out of the 10 billion ads that are up on here, or just get an ad blocker, which I don't know why mine is not working. Anyways, let's head back over to our Jupyter Notebook, and we are going to make a request and get the data from this page. So head back over, and we're just going to start doing some setup. So the first thing that we are going to do is we will say import RE. So we're just importing our packages we're going to be using. And then we are going to import requests. So RE is a package that is going to allow us to use regular expressions. We'll kind of get to that later in the video. And then the last one will say from BS4 import Beautiful Soup, just like that. Go ahead and run that. So now that we have those packages imported, we can go and scrape the actual page. So come back here, grab the URL, head back to your Jupyter Notebook, and we'll just create a variable called URL. So just say URL equals, and then in quotes, put in the URL. It should look like this, where it says transfermarket.com, Erling Haaland, profile, Spieler, I don't know what that means. That's German, and then some numbers. So these numbers are actually the player ID that Transfer Market uses to connect to basically for all their data. They say Erling Haaland in our database, this is his, his unique ID. So we're going to use that later. So we'll just say player ID. So player underscore ID equals, and then we're just going to split this string. We'll say URL.split, and then we're going to split it on this /, and then in brackets do -1. So basically what this URL.split is doing is it's going to split this string on every instance of a /. So it'll split it here, and so this will be one section, and then this will be another section, then this will be a section, this will be a section, right? And so it's going to turn it into a list of all the different split points. And by doing -1, we're just saying we want the very last one, since these numbers are the very last one. There's different ways you could do this, but that is by far the simplest and easiest, so we'll stick with that. And then the next thing that we need is we actually need to use something called headers. So basically headers in web scraping and in browsing is every time you visit a web page, Headers are the information that your browser is sending to a web page to tell it like, hey, who is this? What kind of browser they're using, on what authority do they come from, right? So Transfer Market does require, just so you don't look like you're, a big bot or something, that you do have just some really simple headers. So what you need to do is you just need to come to whatismybrowser.com. If you get an ad, click out of it. And then I'll link this. You can also just search in Google, like, what are my headers, and click on the first one, and this is what the page it'll take you to. But the one we're interested in is this user agent down here. So come back to your Jupyter Notebook, and we're just going to create a variable called headers. So say headers equals, and then it's a dictionary, so the little squiggly brackets. And then the first thing is going to be user-agent, like that, and then a colon, and then we need to come back here and copy this. So this is basically telling it what browser you're using. So we're on Chrome, what our Safari is, we're on an Intel Mac, right? So come back and just paste that in the quotes. And then we can run that, and that creates our headers variable. And then I'm just going to create a bunch of cells just so I can kind of make sure that I'm keeping it up at the top. Okay, so now that we have all of that set up, we can just make our request to the page. So we'll say response equals requests.get, and then our URL in parentheses. And then we need to say headers equals headers. So we're calling the headers parameter in our request, and we're setting it equal to this headers variable that we have created. So if we run that, and then just to check and make sure that we got the right response, if we say response.status code, like that, it should be a 200, which means that it was successful. If it was like a 403 or a 404, that can mean different things, but usually means that our response wasn't successful. So we want to make sure that we have everything set up correctly. And so then the way that we actually parse this page is we turn it into this beautiful soup object. We use this beautiful soup package up here. So we're going to create a new variable called soup, and we'll just say soup equals beautiful soup. So beautiful soup with a capital B and a capital S. And we need to pass in our response object. So we say response.content. And then we need to tell it how we want to parse it. So say html.parser, like that. So run that, and that is basically taken the source code of the web page and it has turned it into this beautiful soup object so that we can now start to extract that data using a lot simpler code and a lot easier methods. So if we head back over to Transfer Market, let's start looking at some of the things that we want to extract. First, let's just extract his name and his number, right? So the way I go about looking at how I can extract this data is by opening the Google DevTools. This is done by, if you right click and then you hit inspect down here, it'll open up this sidebar over here. And then this is all of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code that we can now go and find where all of this information is located. And the easiest way to do this is to come up here and click on this arrow with the dotted box around it. And this is basically an element selector. So if you come over here, then you pay attention to the box, it changes and shows you what the actual element is, right? So if we want to scrape this right here, so say we want to get his name and his number. So the easiest way to do this is by using this code over here. So I clicked on this and it has now showed me what this actual code is and where it's located. So it's located in this H1 tag right here, this H1 HTML tag, and is using this class of data header headline wrapper, which is pretty ambiguous into telling us what this actual information is, but that is where his name and number are located, okay? So the easiest way to extract this is with CSS selectors, and we can just use this information right here to go ahead and grab this name and number, which is basically just text. So come back to your Jupyter Notebook, and we're just going to say soup.select _1 in parentheses. So this is using CSS selectors, and then in quotes we're basically just going to recreate this. So it's an H1. So we'll just say H1, and then in brackets, inside of the quotes, we need to say what the class name is, okay? So we'll say class. So I usually just like to come in, if you triple click on this, and then you can just hit Command C and copy it, or I mean, if you want to, you can right click, copy. And then come back here, and inside the brackets is where we put our class name. So you can paste that in, and so now we have H1 class equals data dash header underscore headline dash wrapper. And just make sure that it looks like this. So if we run this, this is just, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So now this is basically all of that code right there, but it is a beautiful soup object. It is not just text. So what we need to do is we need to say .text, and now it gives us all of the text inside of that. So notice that it didn't give us any of the actual HTML and CSS code. It just gave us what the text is. So we're going to apply just a little bit of text parsing to get Erling Haaland. So if you say .split, and then in quotes, \n, that gives us that list of all of these. And then we just want the last one like last time. So we'll say -1. And so that gives us this really big string with a bunch of space. So if at the end we say .strip, we now get Erling Haaland, okay? So that is how we can get the player name. So we'll just create a variable called player name equals that. And so now if we just say player name, we get Erling Haaland. Now let's go and look at extracting his player number. So if we kind of do the same thing, we'll say soup.select1, and then in parentheses with the quotes, and then let's head back over to his page, and then we can see that actually the number is just in this span tag right here, right? So we don't need to call the same H1. We are going to just call that span tag right here. So we can say soup.select1 span. So we'll say soup.select1 span, and then put the brackets. And then we want this class data-header shirt number. So go ahead and triple click into that, copy it, and then paste it. So span class equals data-header shirt number. So that is what that HTML object looks like. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll say .text. And then if we didn't want the pound sign, we could say .replace, and then put in the pound sign and then a comma with just an empty string like that. So it basically quotes with no space in between. And then we'll say .strip to get rid of white space. And there we go. Now we have the number 9. So now we'll say player number equals soup.select1. And if we run this again, player underscore number, we now get the number 9. And we could turn this into an integer if we wanted to. And so now it is an actual integer, it's not a string. Okay, so that is the first way to extract data from Transfer Market. As I mentioned, there are going to be 3 different ways. That is the first one. That is my favorite way of web scraping, just using CSS selectors and extracting data. It's very simple to do on websites that are set up properly. But Transfer Market, like I mentioned, is not one of those sites. So we're going to have to employ a couple of different methods. Hey everybody, I just wanted to quickly take 30 seconds to remind you about my workshop, Get Free Data Forever by Building Your Own Web Scraping Pipeline. If you're really interested in learning more about web scraping and building a full pipeline with sports data and using that to be able to do sports analysis, then this workshop is fantastic. There's already been great reviews. I'm continually adding more modules and more points to the course to help you really boost up that skill set. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check it out. I'll leave a link in the description below. And let's get back to the video. For example, let's say we want to extract the contract expires. If we come back here and we click on this right here and we come to contract expires, And if you just go look through some of this code right here, there's no real good way to extract this information using CSS selectors. Really, it just turns into a big game of guess because they've named all their classes really weird, like Spieler, Daunten, Nukenduff, Factin. I don't know what that means, but whatever that word is. And so just the way this site is set up has made it really difficult to employ just regular web scraping techniques. So we have to use a couple of different other tactics. So the first one is going to be using regular expressions. I call it regex. I think it's supposed to be regex for regular expression, but I'm going to say regex. And sorry if that offends anybody on here. And what we can use regular expressions for is we can use these to basically define patterns in our source code. So I'll have this code right here to then extract the information. Basically, I'm going to define the pattern of Erling, Braut, Holland, and then I can define and use some code and patterns to then extract only the specific text that maybe comes before or after it. So what we actually need to do now to be able to use regular expressions is we need to use the page source of this website. So what we'll do is we will right click and then come down to view page source right here. And what this is this is basically all of this, but it's just basically the raw code, right? So I like to click on line wrap. So it makes it so you're not having to scroll right. It'll just kind of wrap the code on the side of your screen. And then let's look for contract expires. So if you search contract expires, just like that. So as you can see, this is where the code actually is. The backend looks terrible as well to kind of parse out. So what we'll do is we will just copy. I usually just like to copy, a good chunk before and after the data that I'm trying to extract. So if you just take Command C, just highlight it, hit Command C, let's copy it. And then we're going to head over to a website called regex101.com. So basically what this allows you to do is allows you to put in test strings. So we'll just paste all of our data right there. And then we can start playing with our regular expressions here. So what you'll need to do is just make sure over on your flavor, come over here and hit Python. Okay. So it just makes it so there's different flavors of regex depending on the code that you're using. So Python has its own, PHP has its own, Java has its own, right? So if you don't know any regular expression syntax or kind of patterns, basically the idea is we are going to use string and text to define how and what data we want to gather. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just grab the data. Since we're grabbing data after contract expires, let's just grab the actual words contract expires. So we come down here and copy everything from contract expires. We'll grab the colon and the space and just come up here and paste it right there. So now it will highlight that section blue right there because it's saying, okay, there's one match of contract expires. What we want to do is we want to essentially figure out a way to extract June 30th, 2027. So the easiest way to do this is if we do a period and then a star. So a period and a star will go on everything up until a new line. There are ways to include new lines. We won't use that right now. That is essentially going to highlight all of this right here. If I were to throw in right here June 30th, then it'll stop at June 30th, right? But I can't just hard code June 30th because not everybody's contracts expire June 30th, 2027. So what we can do actually is we can use some stuff around it to now identify this pattern right here. And really what we want to do is we want to capture what's inside of here right now. So how we can do this is we use parentheses around the data that we're trying to capture. So it will highlight that green and it's called a group. So it'll come over here and it'll say group 1, right? So if we type in June 30th, 2027, then if we were to go use this regular expression, it would capture every pattern that was contract expires, and then a June 30th of 2027 appeared. So essentially, since this is in a data-header content span right here, what we can do is we can go ahead and just define this pattern as well. So we'll just kind of do .all, and then we'll say __ content with the greater than sign. And then the reason this is a pattern error right here is because we actually need to escape this in Python. So we do that by doing a / like that. And so now we have successfully grabbed June 30th, 2027. Okay. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to define what's after it. So we'll use this code right here. So we'll just basically copy this span right here. And now it has June 30th, 2027 is still our captured value. So to get rid of it being hard-coded in there as June 30th, 2027, we need to delete that, and then we will do a dot again. It's also saying that it's going to capture the first span because we have two spans in there, and regex works to where it will go until the last one unless we tell it to stop on the first one. And the way we can do that and tell it to stop on the first instance of a span is we just add a question mark like that. And that will stop it right there. So now our group right here is June 30th, 2027. So now we can go and we can copy all of this regular expression right here. So we'll go and we will go back to our Jupyter Notebook, and we are going to use this package RE that we imported. So now we will just say re.search, okay? And then plug in that pattern that we just defined, and then put a comma, and then we'll say soup. We'll say string soup like that. So basically we're just going to use the string version of our soup to extract that data. And then we will add another parenthesis and then do .group1, just like that. So if we have done this correctly, we should be able to run this and we can get June 30th, 2027. So that is just one pretty simple regex. So we'll say player contract. We'll create this into a variable. We'll say player contract expiry equals that. And then if we call player contract expiry, we can run that and we can see that it's June 30th, 2027. So that is how you can use regex to go and extract information that may be more difficult to extract with CSS selectors, but it's definitely possible. There are definite cases where regex does not translate from page to page. So you just kind of have to mess with your regex and figure out the best possible one that can work. Learning regex is definitely difficult to understand and learn at the beginning, but once you kind of grasp the different patterns and the different methods for extracting data, it becomes super useful in web scraping. So feel free to play around with that contract expiry, see if you can come up with a better pattern, because this obviously isn't, there's multiple ways to kind of pattern around that, different things that you could do. And then try to extract different things that are in here. So if you wanted to extract, the place of birth, or if you want to extract height, start playing with different patterns to extract that data as well. So as I was editing the video, I noticed that it was really choppy at a couple of spots, and it got really choppy at this part. So I am re-recording this video. That is why I am now in a green sweatshirt instead of the white t-shirt that I was wearing before, just if there was any confusion right there. But I'm going to redo this section. So the third part and the third method of scraping data from Transfer Market is by using their APIs to grab the data that is being loaded onto the page. So if we look at a lot of this data, for example, the market values, which is a lot of good information about how a player's value has trended and increased and decreased over time, this data is actually loaded by an endpoint that they have. Same thing with kind of their transfer history, maybe these statistics down here. There's a lot of different endpoints that they're using to load this data right here. So what we can do is we can actually call those endpoints and we can extract that data, and it makes it so we don't have to do some really weird parsing, and as well, technically we wouldn't even need to load the page, right? So the easiest way to find this, since we already have our DevTools open, if we click on these two arrows right here, you might not have these arrows if this is spread further, but click on them and then click over to the network tab right here. So network essentially is everything and all the endpoints that are being loaded every time that you load the page or scroll up and down the page, right? So if you hit the circle with the line through it to clear, and then just refresh the page by hitting Command R, or come up here and just refresh the page. So now we're seeing everything that is being loaded when we run this page. So if we click on these right here, I'm going to widen this a little bit just so we can see it a little bit better. So these are all their different endpoints. So if you look at headers, you can see what the endpoint is. This one looks like it's a CDN, some sort of privacy management. This one is from Sorare. This is a config, and then this one is their actual API. So it has their domain, transfermarket.com, saying that it's the API, and then the name of the endpoint, and then at the end it has that player ID that we parsed out earlier. So this one has transfer history, this one has market value, this one is relevant news. Let's see what this one is, current rumors. Next matches. Okay, so let's look at this market value one right here. So if you click on preview, this is all the data that is being returned. So this is just basically a big JSON object or a dictionary of this information that's being loaded in this market value graph right here. So click into this, and if you click into list, you can see this is all the data. So we can see that he was worth 200,000 euros. And then his most recent one, he is now worth 180 million euros. How we get this data is if you right click on this actual endpoint. So right click and then come down to copy and then click copy as CURL. And then we are going to go over to a website called curlconverter.com. So go over to this website, curlconverter.com, and just paste in what you copied. So this is what you copied. This is the CURL code. And this is all of the Python code that we would need to make a call to that endpoint. But since we have already imported requests, usually we don't need cookies. And websites that are really good at tracking users and tracking information, you might need cookies. Headers, we've already created our own headers, so we're not going to need those. So we are just going to copy this last object right here. So go ahead and copy that. And then let's head back over to our Jupyter Notebook and just paste that in and make sure you get rid of the cookies parameter right there. And then we're going to replace, just so that we can make this repeatable across all different players, right? Get rid of this 418560, and we are going to replace that with the player ID. So put curly braces, player ID, and then at the beginning of the string put an F. So F is an F string or a formatted string. Basically it allows us to inject variables inside of the string without having to do a bunch of string manipulation to recreate the string. So now if we run this, it'll run, and then we can check the status code. So if we say response.statuscode, we get a 200. Okay, that means it was successful. And then if you say response.json, like that, we get that same data that we got in the first point, right? So we get this list, and then we're getting all of his different market values. You can look at the keys if you want. This is kind of hard to see in Jupyter Notebook, but if you do response.json keys like this is all of the dictionary keys. So that is how we can use the endpoints to go and get data. So now that we have injected the player ID, all we really need is that player URL right here, and we can repeat this process across basically any player page, right? And so that is kind of how we can go about gathering data for these players and gathering different information. And as well, with these endpoints down here, we can actually go and get more endpoints. So if we go back to the player page, we can repeat that same process for getting this endpoint, which is relevant news if we wanted it, transfer history, and it would just return this same information. So that is how you can apply these techniques to go and get data from Transfer Market. There's a lot of different data points, and if I were to go and show you how to do every single data point, it would take a while. That's why I'm only showing you the techniques that you can then go and apply to get the rest of the data points. The hardest ones definitely are the regular expressions, just because the patterns can be kind of tricky and finicky, but once you can figure that out, you can really start to get more data points, and it'll help you scrape the website more easily. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.